All right, what's going on everyone, and welcome back to Brewbuilds. On today's video, I feel like I was going to show you how to delete videos. All right, what's going on everyone, and welcome back to Brewbuilds. On today's video, I'll be showing you how I cut Mortise and Tenon joints. So you've probably noticed in some of my past build videos that I assembled a project with a Mortise and Tenon joint. I think they're an awesome joint. They're super strong and relatively easy to cut with a couple underneath your belt. So what I got here is just some scrap wood that I'll be using to demonstrate my process and how I cut these. The other thing is the tools that I'll be using I feel like are common in your guys' home garage and shops. I'll be using a table saw, a router, a handful of chisels, and a square. So with that being said, let's get after it. All right, so real quick, I'll be starting off by dimensioning my lumber to make it nice and square. I find this to be a lot easier to work with, but again, you don't need to do this. So my first real step is by laying out my tenon. So I use this marking gauge to scribe out where I'm going to be making my cuts at. I always start with my tenon first and then make my mortise to match that. So now I'll be replacing my standard table saw blade and installing a 3/4 inch dado stack. The insert plate is going to say 7/8 on it, but it's actually 3/4. You don't need to use a dado stack to make this tenon. You could certainly use your standard 1/8 inch table saw blade and just make repeated cuts until all of the waste material has been removed. So now I'm just using a scrap 1x as a spacer from my blade to my fence. It's never good practice to use your miter gauge with your fence. You can cause binding issues and just not a good idea. So what this does is actually holds the lumber off the fence as I'm passing through to make my cuts. Now I'll be using my freshly cut tenon as a stencil to help me align where the mortise needs to be cut in this wood. And my personal preference is to stay about 1/16 of an inch off my mortise marks and then come back with my chisels and hone in on the actual mortise sizing so that way it'll fit my tenon nice and snug. And make note, when you're cutting these mortises, I've taken multiple passes. So not only my depth, am I taking small increments, usually about 1/4 of an inch at a time. I've also had to make, 3 rows of cuts to achieve the actual sizing of my mortise. All right, so that's the quick and dirty on how I make my mortise and tenon joints. If you were intimidated by making these joints prior to this video, I hope you're not now. There's really not a whole lot to them. There is a few things that I hope you picked up through my video as far as when you lay them out and you go to cut your tenons and your mortises, when you're routing them out or using your table saw to cut them out, stay away from that cut mark anywhere from a 32nd to a 16th of an inch, and then come back and sneak up on the cuts with your chisels. And then do test fits as you're going. That'll make your fitment down the road super snug, and you'll be satisfied with your cuts. So real quick with sizing of your joints, typically general rule of thumb is your tenon thickness should be 1/3 the total thickness of the piece that you're tenoning, and then the tenon length should be anywhere from 1/2 to 2/3 the total thickness, or width, I should say, the width of your mortise piece. General rule of thumb, it can change, and then just something to kind of follow. The other thing is try to hold off or stand off your mortise anywhere from 1/2 to 1 inch off the end grain. Give some meat there at the end grain. The end grain can get kind of weak, which once it's glued up, it's typically not a huge deal, but during your test fitment, you can get some blow up, which I had a little here. I cut them the way I did just because it was I could keep my saw blade in the same position and cut the whole thing. So for my actual projects, I usually hold those off a little bit and then just offset your tenon to match up accordingly. So go out there, try some mortise and tenon joints, and who knows, maybe you'll throw your pocket hole jig away. All right, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. I was only kidding, don't throw your pocket hole jigs away.